The miraculous journey of a faithful man, discovering God's divine plan for transformation. In the 3rd year of Jehoiakim, the land was filled with idols, and the hearts of men turned away from the true God, Yahweh. In the ancient land of Ur of the Chaldeans, there lived a man named Abram, whose spirit longed for truth amid the cacophony of idolatry surrounding him. Abram, a seeker of righteousness, was drawn by an unseen force that stirred deep within. He often prayed earnestly, longing for the voice of the Almighty. One starry night, as the gentle winds whispered tales of old, a voice called out to Abram. It was a commanding yet soothing tone, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you." This divine beckoning resonated within Abram's heart, igniting a spark of faith that illuminated his path forward. Though trepidation fluttered in his chest, he knew he must obey. Gathering his belongings, Abram set forth from Ur, bathed in the moonlight and guided by the promise of a land yet unseen. As he traversed through Shechem, the fertile region alive with the sounds of nature, he erected altars to Yahweh, dedicating each step to the one true God. These altars spoke of his trust and devotion to a divine plan that stretched far beyond his understanding. But soon, famine swept through the land, a cruel and unrelenting foe. Driven by desperation and fear for his family's survival, Abram descended into Egypt. The land, rich with temptation, brought with it new trials. Unsure of what awaited them, he faced the troubling thought of his beautiful wife, Sarai, being perceived as a prize by Pharaoh. As anxiety squeezed his heart, Abram deceived the king to protect himself, proclaiming Sarai as his sister. Though his actions bore the weight of betrayal, God's promise remained steadfast. The Lord shielded them both, ensuring their protection in the midst of their faltering faith. Upon their return to Canaan, the tension rose between Abram's herdsman and Lot, his dear nephew. The land once abundant now seemed strained to contain their growing flocks. Trusting in God's provision, Abram demonstrated profound selflessness, allowing Lot to choose his portion first. This profound act stirred the heavens, prompting God to reaffirm his promise to Abram, the land and its vastness destined for his descendants. Then came the news of judgment against the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. A heart full of compassion, Abram stood in boldness before the Lord, interceding for the innocent. His dialogue with God revealed a deep understanding of God's nature and compelled him to seek mercy for the wicked cities, a testament to his unwavering faith. Though years passed and the promise of an heir lingered just beyond reach, hope persisted. Finally, when Sarai, well beyond childbearing years, bore a son, laughter echoed. Isaac had arrived. However, the journey continued, fraught with trials that demanded more than mere hopes and desires. Before we continue with this incredible biblical account, I want to make sure you don't miss any of these powerful scripture stories. Click the bell icon and select All Notifications. These biblical narratives have transformed countless lives throughout history. If God's word through this story is blessing you, please like and share with someone who needs to hear about God's faithfulness today. Tell me in the comments, which biblical story has most impacted your faith journey? I'm always amazed how God's word speaks to hearts across generations. Now let's continue with what the Lord did next. As the horizon spread wide with cacophony of God's promised legacy, a weighty silence enveloped Abram's heart. Challenges loomed ahead, and as the sun dipped below the mountains, shadows of uncertainty crept closer. Would Abram's faith endure the tests soon to come? What twists lay in the divine plan that God knit together for him? The promise that started as a whisper beckoned the faithful to journey further down a path of divine revelation, leaving a beautiful mystery poised for resolution. And it came to pass after these things that God tested Abram. The Almighty spoke to him in the stillness of the night, saying, "Abram, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I will show you." A shudder coursed through Abram's heart. The command was stark and unimaginable, slicing through the tender fabric of his dreams and desires. Yet Abram's faith, firm like the oaks of Mamre, did not waver in the face of this divine trial. Early the next morning, he rose, harnessed his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, along with Isaac. He split the wood for the burnt offering and set out toward the place of which God had told him. As they journeyed for 3 days, the silence was heavy with unspoken questions. Isaac, with youthful innocence, broke the stillness, asking, "Father, behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" In that moment, Abram felt the weight of the promise he held close. "God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son," he replied, his voice steady yet trembling inwardly, trusting in God's provision. They reached the designated place, the land of Moriah, and Abram built an altar there, arranging the wood upon it. With trembling hands, he bound Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. The heavens watched in silence as Abram lifted the knife, his heart a turbulent sea of anguish and resolve. Would he trust the God who had promised countless descendants through this very son? Then, as the blade glinted in the morning sun, an angel of the Lord called out from heaven, "Abram, Abram." With urgency and divine intervention, the voice pierced the air, halting his hand. "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." Abram's breath escaped him as he looked up. In that moment, his heart sang a hymn of relief and gratefulness. There, in a thicket, a ram was caught by its horns. God had indeed provided. He offered the ram as a burnt offering instead of his son. In this act of obedience, God's promise was renewed, and the heavens rejoiced, for the covenant was secured. "By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, I will surely bless you." Abram called the name of the place "The Lord will provide," for on the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. As Abram and Isaac returned, the earth looked different. It was as if creation itself awaited the fulfillment of God's purpose written upon their hearts. The Lord spoke again, reaffirming, "In your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice." Yet, amid this celestial celebration, shadows remained. What of the trials still lingering beyond the horizon? What purpose awaited in the hearts of future generations? Each step of faith would yield a story of divine guidance, and the mystery of God's overarching plan thickened, inviting all to wonder and believe. But little did Abram know, the testing of faith was not yet complete. For in this unfolding tapestry of promise, the fabric of God's redemptive story continued to weave itself into the hearts of the faithful. Would Abram's lineage recognize the weight of God's commitment in the years to come? More was hidden in the depths of the divine narrative, awaiting revelation, as the sands of time shifted beneath the watchers of heaven. And it came to pass that Abram returned to his servants, and as they saw him approaching with Isaac unharmed, their hearts leapt with joy and wonder. The young men were confounded, for they were ready to bear witness to a sacrifice that had not taken place. Abram, with a countenance renewed, spoke to them, saying, "The Lord has indeed provided." As they journeyed back to Beersheba, the winds whispered of the great faith that had unfolded upon the mountain. The news of covenant and mercy flowed among the hills, bearing witness to the faithfulness of God. That night, Abram laid down to rest, but his heart was still aglow with the dread and joy of the day. And he pondered the voice of the Lord, and the assurance of blessing that had been bestowed. In the quiet of that night, the Lord visited Abram again, affirming his promises anew. "Fear not, Abram, for I am your shield, your reward shall be very great." And Abram, trembling with gratitude yet burdened with thoughts of the future, answered, "O Lord God, what will you give me, for I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus?" The Lord spoke to him, saying, "This man shall not be your heir, your very own son shall be your heir." And he brought Abram outside and said, "Look toward heaven and number the stars, if you are able to number them." Then he said, "So shall your offspring be." And Abram believed the Lord, and it was counted to him as righteousness. This moment cemented a deepening relationship between the Almighty and his faithful servant. The heavens twinkled as if they themselves were attesting to the divine promise, and Abram's heart embraced the weight of the covenant. Yet, a flicker of doubt stirred in the shadows of the night. In the days that followed, as Abram tended to his flocks and walked amidst the beauty of the land, memories of the trial at Moriah lingered. The weight of what was commanded had not vanished. Could it truly be, he wondered silently, that a multitude will emerge from me when I was asked to yield my son? These thoughts returned him often to the altar he had built on Moriah, the place where God had provided escape from his anguish. The thicket, the whispers of the ram's struggles each moment etched vividly in his mind. Yet, a revelation glimmered within the depths of his soul, for in his great act of obedience, he sensed that something extraordinary was set in motion. But as the seasons turned, the promise of a son still hung over him like a waiting fog. Abram and Sarai spoke often of their longings, and days turned into years, and still, the blessing of a child eluded them. Sarai, distressed by her barrenness, one day offered her maidservant Hagar to Abram, saying, "Perhaps I shall obtain children by her." Thus, after much deliberation and with a heart heavy with hope for the future, Abram listened to her voice. In a moment of human desire coursing through the divine promise, he took Hagar as wife. Yet, as they sought to fulfill God's promise in their own way, the shadows of complicity crept into their household. Little did they know that this decision would birth conflict and strife, manifesting in the struggles of nations to come, yet behind it remained the steady hand of God, crafting a plan that was larger and more complex than how they saw their moment in time. As time moved forward, God's purpose remained intricately woven, stretching beyond the veil of immediacy. What would it mean for a nation to come from Abram? What trials still awaited in the unfolding history? Thus, the divine narrative awaited its next chapter, with the promise still echoing through the land, "I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you." The story of Abram had only just begun, as many hearts would soon be tested by the trials of faith and the nature of covenant. And it came to pass that Abram heeded the counsel of Sarai, and took Hagar as his wife according to her desire. And Hagar conceived and bore a son, who they named Ishmael. The joy of her pregnancy brought a tumult of emotions within their household, for Sarai's heart twisted with a mixture of hope and bitterness, as she saw Hagar exalted in her own barrenness. As time went on, Hagar began to despise Sarai, and she, bearing the weight of a rivalry ignited by the desire for children, found herself lifted in pride amidst the tension. Sarai spoke sharply to Abram, "My wrong is upon you. I gave my maid into your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, I became despised in her eyes." Then Abram, seeking peace, answered her, "Behold, your maid is in your hand, do to her as you please." And Sarai dealt harshly with Hagar, so that she fled from her presence into the wilderness. There, in her despair, she encountered the angel of the Lord by a spring of water. "Hagar," the angel said, "where have you come from and where are you going?" She replied, "I am fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarai." And the angel of the Lord commanded her, "Return to your mistress and submit to her authority. I will multiply your descendants exceedingly, so that they shall not be counted for multitude." And the angel of the Lord proclaimed, "Behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son, and you shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your affliction." Hagar, astonished by this revelation, cried out to the Lord, "You are the God who sees." Thus, she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, El Roi, for she realized that she had seen him who looks after her. She returned to Abram and Sarai, carrying within her the promise of a son, a new layer to the unfolding plan of God. Abram, now aged 86 years, looked at Ishmael with a heart both stirred and troubled. He had followed his wife's counsel, yet the wound of waiting upon the Lord remained fresh in his soul. Years passed, and the Lord spoke again unto Abram, saying, "I am Almighty God, walk before me and be blameless. And I will make my covenant between me and you, and will multiply you exceedingly." Abram fell on his face before the Lord, his spirit trembling at the words. "As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many nations." The patriarch's heart soared, for he felt the weight of the promise becoming ever clearer. Yet his mind wrestled with the reality of his flesh, the years creeping upon him while the promise lingered like a distant star. "God," he questioned in earnest, "shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old?" And shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear children? But God, unfazed by the limitations of mortal frailty, replied steadfastly, No, but Sarah your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. And Abram wrestled within his heart, leaned into faith, despite the shadows of doubt whispering in the corners of his mind. He returned home, contemplating this renewed promise, knowing that what lay ahead would challenge the limits of his belief. Thus, the fabric of divine destiny continued to weave through the life of Abram. God's sovereign hand fashioned a tale not just of lives but of nations, where each heartbeat was echoed in the vast expanse of providential love. What other mysteries lie ahead for Abram, the father of faith? How would these new beginnings transform the future of generations to come? The path ahead, filled with promise yet shadowed by uncertainty, awaited the unfolding. For even now, God's purposes rested firmly upon the foundation of his eternal decree, through Isaac shall your seed be called. And it came to pass after these things that Abram fell into a deep sleep, and behold, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. And the Lord spoke to Abram, saying, Know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. And also the nation whom they serve I will judge, afterward they shall come out with great possessions. Abram's heart weighed heavy at this revelation, for the vision was a glimpse of trials yet to unfold. Yet amid the foreboding prophecy, the Lord reassured him, But as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace, you shall be buried at a good old age. The promise intertwined within pain was a tapestry of God's sovereign hand. As days turned to years, and Abram pondered the deepening silence of the heavens, the significance of God's covenant bore down upon him. O Lord God, he prayed quietly in the night, what will you give me, seeing I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? Then the Lord spoke again, saying, This one shall not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir. With these words came a vision. He brought Abram outside and said, Look now toward heaven, and count the stars if you are able to number them. And he added, So shall your descendants be. Abram gazed into the vastness, stars piercing the darkness, reflecting the magnificence of God's promise. Believing, he was counted as righteous. Yet, under the weight of expectation, Sarai remained restless. As years passed, she turned to Abram in desperation and said, Behold now, the Lord has restrained me from bearing children. Go in unto my maid, it may be that I shall obtain children by her. In his heart, Abram felt the familiar ache of unease but acquiesced to Sarai's request. Thus, Hagar bore the weight of the decision once more, becoming a vessel of hope in a house saturated with longing. And the result of their union was Ishmael, whose life began to flourish even as Abram's faith was set to be tested anew. The boy grew, and the tensions within the household heightened, creating an atmosphere fraught with the shadows of past decisions. But God, in his infinite patience, was weaving a clearer tapestry. The time was approaching when he would reveal the fullness of his plans. Then the Lord, full of grace, appeared to Abram again and declared, Your name shall no longer be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. The promise emerged, vibrant and alive, forever altering the identity of the man who walked in faith. As the years pressed on, there came a shift in anticipation of the unimaginable. In the sacred stillness, the promise of Sarah's son grew like a seed beneath the soil, waiting for the divine touch that would bring forth laughter where there had been sorrow. Within Abram's heart, joy began to blossom, nourished by hope. But amidst this divine orchestration lingered the question of how God would fulfill his promise. Would Ishmael fulfill the legacy? Or would Isaac bear the covenant blessings? For what divine mysteries awaited, tied to the lineage that God would bless? In the unfolding saga of faith and promise, the question remained, what wondrous plan did God still hold in store for Abraham, the father of many nations? And it came to pass that the Lord continued to speak to Abraham, saying, As for Sarai your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. And I will bless her, and also give you a son by her, then I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations, kings of peoples shall be from her. Abraham fell on his face and laughed, for he was overwhelmed by the magnitude of the promise. He spoke in his heart, saying, Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? Yet, within him arose a steadfast hope. He sought to grasp the unfolding mystery, realizing that the ways of God often transcended human understanding. He lifted his voice and interceded, Oh, that Ishmael might live before you. But the Lord replied, No, Sarah your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. In this moment, a holy revelation settled in Abraham's heart, for he understood anew that God's promises are not bound by earthly limitations. Thus, he returned to his tent with renewed faith, embracing the paradox of divine possibility. Some days later, 3 heavenly visitors appeared at the tent of Abraham under the oaks of Mamre, and he quickly ran to meet them. Bowing low, he entreated them to stay, saying, My Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass on by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. The visitors accepted his hospitality, and as he provided them with food, they revealed the purpose of their visit. One of them said, I will surely return to you according to the time of life, and behold, Sarah your wife shall have a son. Sarah listened in the tent door, which was behind him, and she laughed within herself, saying, After I have grown old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? The Lord said to Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh, saying, Shall I surely bear a child, since I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will return to you, according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. Thus, the promise reverberated through the ages, echoing the faithfulness of God. Abraham was left in solemn awe, his heart stirred with gratitude, knowing the covenant would unfold in ways beyond his comprehension. As time pressed on, the anticipation for the fulfillment grew. Sarah's heart, once heavy with doubt, now danced with the lightness of hope. Yet, within the folds of divine promise lay deeper questions. How would the generations unfold? What would become of Ishmael, the son of the bondwoman? Divine timing was yet to reveal all, but the plan of God would not falter. For he, who called light out of darkness, was poised to bring forth life in the barren womb. The moment was approaching when all creation would witness the tender fulfillment of his promise. Were not the ways of God often hidden, yet culminating in glorious revelation? And thus, the question lingered, what miraculous transformations awaited the family of Abraham, and how would God's intricate design unfold in the ages to come? And it came to pass that as the days turned into weeks, the promise of God weighed heavily yet sweetly upon the hearts of Abraham and Sarah. The air was thick with expectation, for the Lord's word would not return void. In the midst of their waiting, Sarah, observing her own body and the years that had forged their reality, was troubled. She sought counsel with Abraham, speaking softly yet with a heart burdened, Perhaps it is not this way that the Lord would have us. Should we not look to Hagar, my maid, that she may bear a child upon my knees? Abraham listened intently, yet deep inside, a whisper of disquiet stirred. For he knew the promise spoken to him and could not shake the assurance that Sarah was destined to bear the child through whom the lineage would flow. So it was that he pondered the depths of their own understanding against the vastness of God's will. But seeing Sarah's eagerness, he nodded and clothed his agreement with gentle support, and thus Hagar was taken. In time, she conceived and bore a son, naming him Ishmael, and her joy became Abraham's relief, for he believed they had secured the fulfillment of God's promise through a different means. Yet the Lord had not forgotten his original decree. When Ishmael was 13, God spoke to Abraham once more. I shall bless Ishmael, and he shall be fruitful and multiply. But my covenant will be established with Isaac, the Lord declared, confirming that his purpose would be fulfilled through the son of the promise. Abraham fell upon his face in reverence, realizing the scope of God's intentions were greater than he could fathom. The beauty of divine orchestration was unfolding, and with trembling faith, he wrestled with the implications of the covenant, both for his beloved Sarah and their son of the bondwoman. Days passed, and the seasons changed. The air grew thick with heavenly promise and earthly struggle. In every encounter with the divine, Abraham learned that God's plans were not mere agreements but a tapestry woven with threads of grace, challenge, and love. The time drew near, and the promise would soon manifest. Sarah, who once listened from beyond the tent, now sensed a stirring within her heart that transcended her age, for the wind of God's Spirit had begun to whisper rejuvenation to her barren womb. And as the sun dipped low beyond the horizon, 3 celestial visitors appeared again, this time for a solemn blessing. With faithful Abraham at their side, they delivered the renewed proclamation, "At the appointed time, I will return, and Sarah shall have a son." Sarah, still hiding within the tent, overheard the promise again, and this time her laughter mingled with awe, for hope began to dispel her doubts. She marveled, remembering the Lord's assurance was imbued with unmistakable authority. Yet, what lay ahead for Ishmael? And how would all nations be blessed through Isaac? The sacred questions lingered as palpable tension in the air, awaiting resolution, belief, and the manifestation of God's ultimate design. Thus, within the hearts of Abraham and Sarah, the flames of divine expectation began to kindle, illuminating shadows of the past and revealing glimpses of future glory. Here, amidst anticipation and promise, they stood on the edge of wonder. And as the laughter of children began to echo from the very hills, the world held its breath, awaiting the tender unfolding of his sovereign plan. What would the birth of Isaac herald for the promise of blessings yet unseen? And it came to pass, after the celestial visitants departed from the tents of Mamre, that Abraham returned to his place, his heart swelling with joy for the promise that was yet to come. Each beat echoed with the anticipation of Isaac's birth, the child destined to fulfill covenant promises that transcended generations. In the days that followed, the laughter of Sarah transformed the atmosphere. It was a sound of not just joy, but of deepening faith. She busied herself, inspecting garments that had been left untouched, preparing a cradle that would belong to the child of her womb. Each woven thread seemed to carry a prayer, a delicate offering of her trust unto the Lord. "I will be a mother." She rejoiced, her heart lifted high, the shadows of doubt replaced by light. And yet, in her joy, the memory of Ishmael lingered. Sarah perceived the tension that brewed within their household. The child of her maid seemed a thorn in the bloom of newly blooming hope. In her heart, insecurities arose. And as Ishmael grew into a young boy, he often played beneath the wide sky, running free and basking in the warmth of the sun, unaware of the weight of heritage that lay upon his tiny shoulders. Yet Sarah's heart, though filled with wonder, bore burdens too. For she feared the divisions that might arise when the son of the promise came forth. It was not long before the sands of time shifted, for the Lord spoke again unto Abraham, saying, "The time draws nigh for the promise to be made flesh. When I visit you, Sarah shall indeed bear you a son." With renewed wonder, Abraham worshipped, declaring within his spirit the magnificence of the Almighty. But as days passed, the call toward Ishmael stirred uneasily. The Lord, in his wisdom, knew the hearts of Abraham and Sarah. He was the orchestrator of every season. Then, in the fullness of time, the promise became reality. The laughter of Sarah culminated into a joyful cry, echoing within the tents as she brought forth Isaac. The household was filled with exultant shouts of laughter, as neighbors gathered to witness what the Lord had done. "I have brought forth joy," she exclaimed, her voice ringing like sweet bells in the air. But in the shadows, similar cries emerged, the voice of Hagar distressed, wandering in the wilderness with Ishmael. The spirit of separation began to rise, and God, who sees, heard the anguished sounds of both hearts. He spoke to Abraham, saying, "Fear not, for I am with you. Even though your heart is torn, I shall make a great nation of Ishmael. I will hear him as I hear Isaac." Abraham, grateful yet heavy-hearted, obeyed the voice of God, providing for Hagar and Ishmael's journey into the unknown land where they would flourish under the care of the Almighty. With every step toward a new beginning for his firstborn, Abraham felt the divine intertwined within the roots of his lineage. Could both sons fulfill the promise of God? It was a mystery layered deep within the sovereign plan of the Creator, whose ways often surpassed understanding. And as the earth bore witness to the unfolding events, peace settled over Abraham's soul, reminding him of divine promises yet realized. The now miraculous laughter of Isaac would intertwine with Ishmael's destiny, leading nations into a legacy foretold. The time had come for Isaac's laughter, Abraham breathed, gazing upon his son. But what still lay ahead for the nations born of promise and separation? What divine purpose awaited those who bore the covenant? Thus the narrative pressed forward into uncharted territories, resonating with an echoing truth in the divine will, ensconcing all in sacred anticipation. The path ahead would unfold mysteries untold, revealing the depth of God's sovereign design. And it came to pass after Isaac was weaned, that Abraham made a great feast, celebrating the day of his son's joyous occasion. All the people of the land, neighbors and kin, gathered beneath the vast skies to partake in the great blessing bestowed upon Abraham and Sarah. The laughter that filled the air was as sweet as honeycomb, echoing across the hills of Mamre. As the revelry unfolded, Sarah's heart, once heavy with fear, now soared as she beheld her son of promise, a radiant child whose laughter danced like the wind. But in the midst of celebration, she observed Ishmael, now a young boy, playing with the children. Yet, a shadow loomed, for as Ishmael laughed and ran, his countenance was marked by something she perceived as mockery. Turning to Abraham, Sarah's voice was laced with urgency, "Cast out this bondwoman and her son. For the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, Isaac." Abraham's heart sank, for he loved Ishmael deeply. He was a child of his own making, yet he also knew the weight of Sarah's words bore the truth of the covenant. "But God, I cannot." He sought counsel with his heart heavy, and in the silence, the voice of the Almighty resonated within him, "Listen to the voice of Sarah, for it is through Isaac that your offspring will be named. And concerning your son Ishmael, I will make him a nation also." Thus, with a resolute heart, Abraham obeyed the voice of God. He took bread and a skin of water, giving them to Hagar, along with his blessing. "Go forth into the wilderness," he spoke gently, though his voice trembled, "the Lord will be with you." Hagar, though willing to obey, felt the fear of abandonment as she wandered the desolate land. The sun bore down upon her, and the water soon ran dry. In her despair, she placed Ishmael under a shrub and went away, sitting at a distance, unable to bear the sight of her son's thirst. "Let me not see the death of the child," she cried, lifting her voice to the heavens, where the stars twinkled with promise. And in that moment, the angel of God called out to her from heaven, saying, "What troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the lad where he is." With divine compassion, the Lord opened her eyes to a well of water nearby. She filled her skin and quenched the thirst of her child. Thus, Ishmael was sustained, and the Lord was with the boy as he grew. Ishmael became an archer, dwelling in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife from the land of Egypt. In the tents of Abraham, the days continued to flow with Isaac's laughter, yet in the heart of the patriarch, there was a complex weave of joy and sorrow. He pondered the fate of Ishmael and the promised nation to come. Thus, two destinies diverged, he mused, each held within the hands of a sovereign God. What great purpose does he weave into the fabric of nations? And as the sun dipped low upon the horizon, the heavens whispered secrets not yet revealed, an echo of generations unfolding in the presence of the Almighty who alone knows the end from the beginning. Yet, as history continues to envelop these profound truths, a new chapter awaits, rich with promise and divine intricacies yet hidden within the heart of God. What other nations were yet to rise from this great tapestry of faith and struggle? The paths intertwined, each a note in the symphony of salvation, cried out for revelation. And it came to pass in the fullness of time that God's ancient promise prepared to unveil its ultimate revelation. In the hearts of both Abraham and Sarah, the echoes of laughter rang louder than the past sorrows that had beset them. Witnessing the covenant fulfilled through Isaac brought the resolution they longed for, and yet the divine symphony of nations now awaited its grand crescendo. The sun rose with a brilliance that felt like the promise itself igniting the heavens. Sarah, rejoicing in her motherhood, felt the burdens of her past lifted as she cradled her son, Isaac. The covenant community gathered around her, celebrating the joyous beginning of a lineage destined to bless all nations. Abraham, too, lifted his voice in worship, offering sacrifices to the Lord, as the divine reiteration of the promise watered the dry ground of his soul. "Through Isaac shall your seed be called," the Lord reminded him, and in that moment, Abraham's vision expanded, understanding that God's faithfulness flowed out beyond his immediate family, stretching toward generations yet to come. However, unbeknownst to the hearts beating with joy around Isaac, a new chapter loomed with potential for trial and steadfastness. Years unfolded, and as Isaac grew, the bonds of unity felt a tug towards the past. The overshadowing presence of Ishmael and the implications of choices made were never entirely forgotten. God, the impeccable weaver of destinies, knew exactly what was required for the development of both branches of Abraham's family tree. Then, one day, the Lord spoke to Abraham again, commanding him to go to Mount Moriah. Abraham's heart quaked, not at the voice of the Lord, but at the sacred weight of this new challenge. "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love," the Lord declared, "and offer him there as a burnt offering." Abruptly, the laughter ceased in Abraham's soul, the promise felt threatened. Yet, in that moment of profound anguish, the faith forged in many trials rose from deep within. "The Lord will provide," he whispered, a resounding declaration of trust which he had lived experience with, as he approached the peak of obedience with Isaac walking beside him, the wood for the sacrifice placed upon the boy's tender shoulders. In that heavy silence, filled with the weight of divine testing, Abraham's heart thrashed against doubt, yet wrestled toward steadfast faith. Could the one whom God promised to multiply be the very one he was asked to sacrifice? Confusion cracked the surface of his trust, but through it all shone the light of certainty in God's character. "Where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Isaac asked innocently, and Abraham looked upon the boy, his heart splitting into fragments yet resolving together in one key truth: God would indeed provide. At the pinnacle of Mount Moriah, as hearts trembled in correspondence with the divine decree, Abraham prepared the altar, placing Isaac upon it with hands both trembling and resolute. Just as he raised the knife, the angel of the Lord called out, "Abram, do not lay your hand upon the lad." At that moment, the heavens rejoiced, for where despair might have entered, divine mercy prevailed. A ram caught in thorns declared God's provision once more and echoed through the ages. "On this mount, it shall be provided," Abraham proclaimed as he beheld the grace that intertwined both Isaac's life and the legacy of Ishmael's lineage. Thus, the miraculous moments converged upon the profound understanding that through every trial, God would unfold his promise even when humans falter. Years later, as Isaac's laughter rang forth to fill the earth, the news of Abraham's faithfulness became a testament both to the nations yet unfurled and to the hearts stirred by the promise of salvation through the descendants of Abraham. As generations rose and fell, the shadows of doubt and the struggles of humanity interwove with divine providence, revealing how God's unchanging promises held together the very fabric of existence. The laughter of Isaac would usher forth a lineage that included kings and prophets and, ultimately, the Messiah, the embodiment of eternal hope for all the nations. And so it was, that the covenant made with Abraham found its sure fulfillment. The God who sees intricately wove two destinies together, uniting them under the auspices of his grace, forever shaping the promise into a profound legacy that echoes through time. Dear friends, as we ponder the magnificence of God's unfolding plan, we invite you to take part in this journey of faith. Click the bell icon and subscribe immediately to stay connected to God's Word and not miss the next powerful biblical stories. Leave a like now to help spread God's truth through the algorithm. This is the moment to help spread the biblical word. Comment below with your reflections on this incredible story of faith and how it has impacted your walk with Christ. Your thoughts matter, and we want to hear from you. Don't wait even one more second. Share this transformative testimony with at least 5 friends who need to hear God's truth. Only true believers understand the importance of supporting biblical content to reach more souls for Christ. Let us spread His gospel together.